Hey everybody, this is Steve Junion with Human Centered Healthcare. This week I have a very special guest that we're going to be speaking with, Jessica Candito, who works with Health Partners Plans out of Philadelphia. I had the pleasure of working with Jessica in a sprint initially, and then she got the job to actually launch a department to focus on consumer experience. I think it's an amazing interview. I think Jessica's amazing. Hopefully you'll learn a lot in our conversation, and I hope you enjoy.
All right, Jessica. If you, I have an odd request for an introduction. Are you open to
Yes, this one you might have to record over.
it? No, I'm never going to record over this one. So, if you think about your career, what superpower would you tell your clients that you had to make them more successful at consumer experience?
Never settle and always remain driven.
Tell me a little bit more. Why never settle and always remain driven? Why are those important to you as superpowers? Or maybe what happens if you settle? How does that change the viewpoint?
I think now I'm getting really deep thinking because you said superpower, and those aren't really superpowers, but I guess they are pieces of a superpower. So I have to think about what that superpower would be. But
Okay. Go
you
ahead.
can't settle because when someone becomes complacent, they get forgotten. And if you're driven, then you eventually get somewhere. And it's going to take time. It might take time. But everyone is their own self-advocate. And if you become stale, you're just forgotten.
I think you're absolutely right. And maybe those are superpowers, but maybe they roll up into something higher. But we'll think about it. And if you think of a good word for that superpower, then feel free to reach out to me, and then I will go ahead and add it into the post notes. Okay?
Sounds good.
Awesome. All right, Jessica, thanks for that great introduction. I've known you for, my gosh, 18 months now, or at least a year. And what I'd love for you to do is just share a little bit about how you came to this role. Talk to me about your journey to the work that you do today in the world of consumer experience. Could you share some of your experiences?
Sure. And please redirect me if I get off path or go too far. I think where I am today was a road of many opportunities that I think stem from just the passion of wanting to just help people, something as simple as that. I was really given the opportunity to step in the field of customer experience a little over a year ago working at Health Partners Plans. And I don't know if you want me to get detailed about the company, but
yeah, I think you could give like an overview of what the company does, because I think it absolutely fits in with your story about helping people.
Sure. So Health Partners Plans is a managed care organization, nonprofit, one of the very fewly owned across the nation MCO by hospital systems, centrally located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Center City. A small plan that started a little over 30 years ago with a Medicaid product, and then quickly expanded to CHIP, which is the state children's health insurance program, and Medicare products. So I got my undergrad in social work, and I just knew when I graduated from high school that I wanted to help people and better their lives. So initially I went into undergrad with a major of psychology, and then shortly after that quickly realized that psychology was kind of just focusing on the mind, not really the person as a whole. So then I quickly dipped into education, and then realized really quickly, this is, about educating people. I want to go bigger than that. And so I landed in social work. But quickly realized with social work that the systems were really not victim-friendly. As sad as that sounds, it's just not a victim-friendly system. So I just wanted to work in the communities and get to know people individually on an individual level, to not only gain additional knowledge, but to just know how can I help this person and their support system, which includes family members, which includes their doctors and education. So all the components that I was kind of trying to look at initially when I got out of high school, and realizing that these are all factors that collaboratively touch a person and their life. So,
yeah, that makes total sense.
Yes, I graduated with my undergrad in social work, and then starting working for a nonprofit child care resource and referral program that helped low-income families with subsidized child care. And at that time, I was pregnant and having my first child, so that opened up not only a professional experience, but also a personal one. And throughout that experience with child care information services, I touched upon health insurance. So many families that we helped with child care also qualified for CHIP because the income guidelines were very similar. So that was kind of like my first touch on healthcare outside of my own personal experience of obtaining health insurance for myself, which obviously looks totally different than a Medicaid, Medicare, or a CHIP family or recipient. So from there, I branched on being self-employed with eBay, and that was just a snippet of my life, but decided through that journey to further my education and getting a master's in human resources. At the time, I left Child Care Information Services, which was in 2008. That's kind of when human resources became an administrative entity, where that used to be kind of a role that was taken on the office manager, and part of their job description, it became a sole entity and kind of like a C-suite position, kind of the partner to the CEO of an organization. And me, loving startups and wearing multiple hats, I wanted to embark on that journey. So I decided to go back to school and get my master's in business administration, but specializing in human resource management. So upon getting my master's and certification in human resource management, getting back into the working field and coming out of the self-employment because I got married, had more children, I got sucked back up into the community work because I got the opportunity to work at Health Partners Plans. And I started here in 2013 and got the opportunity to work with the community relations department, which, again, like I said, draws you back into the community. So it's very difficult, especially being a deeply rooted plan like Health Partners Plans, to go to events and coordinate events without talking to our membership or even the community. And again, it just draws you back to the story of the person. So shortly after working in community relations, I was given the opportunity to become a manager, and the focus of the department shifted more from a community relations to a community marketing and sales division, still working in the community, but then getting the opportunity to do customer experience shortly after that. And that was something that took me back to the kind of the HR piece of my journey, and saying, I want to know a little bit more about this. And then I got the opportunity to meet you and work with you and Sean to launch the whole CX experience and to learn it, but not only learn it, to implement it and institute it in an organization that's so heavily government and state regulated, and healthcare at that. You hear about companies like Amazon and Wawa who do such a great job with the customer experiences. Like, how do you institute that in such a heavily regulated plan like HPP? But I remember.
Do you ever wish you could just? Do you ever think that, hey, if I didn't have all these regulations, that how would that impact you think, as far as the transformation that HPP's been going through?
I think the possibilities would kind of be endless when it comes to testing things and seeing whether or not, you're on the right path, or how you can make things better, or how you fail and then make it better, go through another process of testing so you get to that, sweet spot of this is definitely going to work, and then expanding on it to make a great impact, to not only improve the experience of that end user that you're designing for, but also for an organization and the assets and the value that you bring to an organization by using that framework of thinking.
Absolutely. I consider that regulatory, some of those barriers or constraints also drive creativity, I think, as well. I mean, have you experienced that through your work?
Definitely. I think people who have to meet those regulations or check off those boxes, if you will, put themselves in kind of like literally a box of thinking. It prevents them from thinking out of the box and thinking really big, where taking this CX experience is kind of saying, okay, you know what, we do have those restrictions, we're regulated. So how do we think really, really big? And then once we come up with solutions, then apply compliance and legal to it to see how we can make sure that we're meeting expectations and those areas.
And I think you were very strategic along the way, because as part of the work that you did, you actually included legal and compliance and other areas that are absolutely critical to you moving your work forward as part of some of the experiences. Could you share a little bit about that, how you really worked with them and engaged them and brought them in?
Yes, I think across the board, many individuals in the organization are very hesitant or resistant to make decisions or implement some strategies because of legal and compliance. And I think involving them early on, you have to give them the time to, I guess, process how this type of framework and thought process takes place. And once they're, I think, committed to it and get it, it becomes a lot easier, but it does take some time because, again, it's a certain way of thinking, and CX kind of disrupts that way of thinking drastically. And so while you're trying to get buy-in from the organization as a whole, just to be able to tackle those areas can be cumbersome, but very rewarding in the end because, again, you just have to get that buy-in, so it takes some time.
Yeah, and there's going to be bumps because just by the nature of the work that you do, you're disrupting the culture, right?
Yes.
And that can cause a lot of concern, both at an organizational level and at individual levels, which I know from personal experience that has happened through the transformation that you're working on. So when you tell people what you do now, you can people clearly see a direct line from your social work to consumer experience, right?
Yes.
You know, and I think what I loved about what you said earlier was that you've always wanted to help people, and that as you sorted out what that might look like, from social work, then to HR, then to the community work, and then ultimately, you know, being the director of consumer experience and really focusing on a transformation and in a widely respected healthcare organization, you know, you've been able to carry that thread throughout this, and you really, you know, I don't say this facetiously, but you bleed for your members. You do everything that you can to really benefit them. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
And when you think about it, you know, like I said, you're leading this transformation, and you've got some great leadership there, and Michelle and Bill that are very supportive of this. When you think about incorporating the perspective of the consumer, are there examples that stand out to you as above and beyond what you might have expected in terms of, you know, incorporating the perspective of the consumer that you can share?
Definitely. I think I've kind of known it all along as part of my passion of just wanting to help people, that all it takes is just to talk to someone, and how just that connection solves so many issues. I think for me, you know, when we reference customers, we just don't talk about our members. We talk about, you know, the providers that we contract with, the community organizations we work with, outside vendors, and even ourselves as peers, our customers to each other. So, you know, I just remember top of mind, we had an internal focus group for a project that we're working on, the Community Wellness Center in West Philadelphia. And in that area, it's very heavily Muslim population, and we had a community stakeholder come in and just talk about being Muslim, and I just learned so much. I learned that he was raised in Catholic school, and there are very similar Catholic beliefs to the Muslim religion. I learned that they believe in certain saints and in the Virgin Mary, and in just sitting through that 1 hour session, I just learned so much. And that was an internal focus group, so it was our staff. And we even learned as an organization how we can value our employees as our customers even more, because we learned that if we allow them their hour of prayer outside of that lunch hour, or give them a prayer room to be able to pray that prayer, it's fulfilling their spiritual need, which gives them that motivation and that appreciation to your employer to sit here and say, because you provided that opportunity to me, now I will go back to work and, exceed expectations because you gave me that flexibility, and it just means that so much to me.
Well, at first when you said you were going to go down the road of an internal example, I wasn't aware of that. And I think it's a fabulous way to look at it is, like you said, just by speaking with people, bringing in people that are different than you. And you obviously had a business reason for bringing this person in because you're going to be putting a center there. But you learned so much outside of the center and even applied it or looking to apply it organizationally.
Yes, and to even speak to the current work that we've done in special needs for our membership population, the knowledge that I've learned in such a short period of time of 12 weeks is astounding. I thought I had a great idea of how our unit operated, but my education of that area was very minimal, and I just think in just speaking to some of our members and just seeing how we think internally we're creating or instituting systems that make their lives easier, we're really just making it much more difficult. But it takes just talking to people and getting that insight would eliminate so many admin hours of meetings and planning and money by just talking to people.
You brought up the aspect of talking to your concerns a couple different times. Is that something that is just, it seems absolutely critical to the work you do? And if so, which I kind of know the answer, but what's your approach to that?
Absolutely, it's critical. I think it's free, and it's the best way to market yourself. If you don't talk to individuals, you don't really know what they're thinking or what they need, and that changes every day. And I know it's hard from an organizational perspective to kind of do that, especially having a membership of over 283,000 members across all lines of business. But then you have to look at what is the goal. Is the goal to communicate better with our members? So then you just institute ways that you can do so. But again, you have to communicate with those members to see what's their preferred method of communication.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think what you're really saying as well, or in addition to that, is that you're really focused on building empathy to then build solutions that really can have a positive impact on your members.
Exactly.
And I've been in some of those situations where you've had members come in and the whole room breaks down in tears because just hearing their stories. Now, how would you, because some people will say, wow, if you just listen to your customers and your consumers, you're going to build stuff that people don't want. How would you argue that it's absolutely critical to listen to them, and then what do you do with that information?
It's funny because we've had those types of approaches, and I compare it to almost like an automobile company. An automobile company is not going to build a car without talking to the consumer, to the customer, the person who's going to buy this vehicle. They're not just going to go and manufacture a vehicle with parts and features that are not going to be used. What makes healthcare any different?
I think that's a really good point. I mean, if we spend all this time designing cars that meet or exceed the needs of, for example, a young 20-something hipster, which I don't relate to anymore, and I would have to build empathy versus, Steve in the minivan needs 30,000 cup holders, right? Why can't we do that for healthcare? I mean, that's a great example. I mean, you probably have the Maserati. Actually, I know what you drive. So, but I do know what you want to drive, right? You got you still have the Fusion rolling?
Oh, the Cruise?
The Cruise,
yes,
sorry.
And now it's Trinity's. It's okay, the Trinity's car, because it was purchased for her and mine from the beginning.
Ah, okay. All right, good. So hopefully that means you've got the vehicle that you were looking at a while back. So
we're working towards it.
Working towards it. Well, that's great. No, I just think that's so important, what you said there regarding the perspective of the consumer. We all know that they don't necessarily have the answers, but just by sitting down and listening to them helps us design and deliver better solutions. And when you think about the work that you've been doing, because honestly it's been nonstop, and I admire you so much for coming into the role and just immersing yourself in it. If you were to pull your head up for just a little bit and look back, what do you think your biggest challenges have been as far as really not only bringing along your team, because you have a small team that work in the consumer experience area, but what have been your biggest challenges in bringing the organization along to want to include more deeply the perspective of consumers?
I think that's a great question, and I kind of ask myself that every day. If I knew then what I know today, it definitely would have been completely different. But I think anyone who has the mindset and understands empathy, you don't necessarily have to be, a CX pioneer to know how to empathize with someone. It's something very simple that you can tap into easily, and people naturally have that skill. But I think there were things that I kind of envisioned already, and then there were things that were unexpected. I did envision that it would take time to get buy-in from the organization, especially having a staff of over 1,100 individuals. But I have to say, the buy-in, once we started getting it, it was very fast-paced. And again, being a little over a year of the inaugural release of this department, I'm so shocked at how much buy-in we've gotten thus far. But with that being said, we've also had the challenges of implementing a lot of the ideas that come out of our projects and sprints. We have a very heavily, we have a culture that is very resistant to change. And I think that can be identified anywhere. There are a lot of people who are just resistant in general to change, but I am just a very optimistic person and a risk taker. But trying to get them to understand that we just have to test these things. It's not about putting millions of dollars on the table. Some organizations have the money to do that, some don't, and we are just one that we don't. So why not take baby steps, and why not just test? So we're talking to people, we're listening to them. Let's take that information and let's take the chance of piloting something small and then seeing what comes out of that. We revisit it. Back to what I said earlier, did we fail? Do we need to revisit again and tweak to make it close to perfection? Because you're never going to get perfection. But in this industry, you need to work really quickly, especially being the world of being so tech savvy. New things are coming out every day. So when you do these projects and you get a cross-functional team in a room to tackle problems and come up with solutions, you need to work quickly to test those solutions. And I think that's where we are today. And the challenge of getting all those stakeholders to get frameworks together to pilot these ideas and test with members so that we can start understanding whether or not they work.
So that sounds like really one of your strategies is making sure you've got that cross-functional group of folks to really advocate to move forward on any potential solutions. Is that right?
Yes.
Awesome. And I want to take a step back because you had mentioned something about the culture. You didn't realize after a certain point that it would go as quickly as it has in terms of the transformation. What are indicators, to you, that you're being successful in transforming the culture really to focus more on the consumer? What are you seeing, hearing, feeling, or experiencing?
So we have the ambassador training, which is kind of the 101 basics of customer experience, where you learn, or not learn, but you practice empathizing and identifying that your customer is not just your member in our situation. And then leaving with some tools that you can institute in your daily job and work. So having people circle back and give feedback on that class, having people wanting to sign up, because like you said, we are a small team, we're a lean team of 4, so with an organization of 1,100, and requiring everyone to go through this training, we do the trainings in increments of about 30 people. And we host them monthly. So having people come up to us, reach out to us and saying, I attended the ambassador training and this is what I thought about it and it was so great and it changed my life. And then having individuals coming up to us and stopping us in the hallway and saying, hey, a coworker of mine went to the training. They told me it was so great and I haven't gone through it. Can you sign me up for it? Attending press team meetings and getting requests at monthly operating meetings to present findings on focus groups or surveys that we facilitated, and then hearing even C-suite and senior executives talk about how important the customer experience and instituting that in everyone's role is a priority. Those are all things that kind of make me sit back and smile and say they're getting it, they understand it, and they know it's needed.
Is there anything that you've done that you think has helped accelerate that? I know you talked about the ambassador training and so forth, but do you think what was the tipping point maybe?
I think it was numerous things. We also launched a SharePoint site where we started dumping all of this information and all of our findings and attending staff meetings and kind of forcing ourselves in to kind of talk about it and piggyback off of other people's stories and kind of saying, that's an example of a customer experience, or challenging thinking. How do you think that person would have felt if you would have approached them this way? So kind of having the conversations in addition to showing tangible outcomes through CX work and the sprints as well. And kind of going back to, skipping around a little bit, I apologize, but going back to some of the frustrations, we just completed our 3rd sprint. And what comes out of that are ideas, and to the frustration piece, to the culture disruption piece. We're coming up with these solutions, and if you don't move fast on them, they're yesterday's news, or you're going to come in and see your competitors kind of doing it. So I think it's a combination of multiple things.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I think your background, both the work in the community and as part of the sales organization, have really enabled you to be successful in terms of moving the organization forward. Some of those capabilities and competencies that are required to excel in sales, which you did, I think you're using on a fairly regular basis.
Agreed. Yes.
Yeah, and you're not shy, which is always good too. So, like you said, you can't be. In order to kind of be the defender of the consumer, you have to put yourself into positions, which means getting yourself into meetings, and not only advocating for them, but sponsoring that voice of the consumer when others aren't necessarily attuned to that yet. So I feel like you guys have done a great job with that. And moving on, you talked a little bit about culture. Could you talk a little bit more about how leadership and mindset have impacted the transformation? I know you've talked about it a little bit, but how does that work together to get you at a point to where you're today to see results?
It definitely helps spread the word because, again, once you get someone to not so much buy in, but to understand the concept and how powerful it is and how it's just needed. It's part of the golden rule. You treat others how you expect to be treated. It becomes second nature. And I think it can be bittersweet in the sense that, in order to see movement, you need that blessing. But at the same time, once the blessing is given, not only do you have an advocate partner in customer experience aside from you, but it's someone to help push the ideas move and projects to move forward.
Yeah, and I know, I remember the first time that I met Bill and Michelle would have been July of probably 2016, just to give people a point of reference. When I was with Sean Nason, and I think we were presenting at World Health Congress, and I remember Bill coming up after the presentation saying, I want to do more of that. And I want to make sure that everybody knows HPP is a leader because they really do know their members, their consumers, their customers. And I think what Bill saw when we presented is he wanted to amplify that even more. And so having your CEO at the forefront always helps, and I'm sure you'd agree with that. And even more so is the mindset, because I think you'd agree, and I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more. How has the mindset had to shift at an organizational level for you to even get the success that you had today?
Yeah, I agree. Bill has such a passion, and that takes a lot because obviously it trickles down to other staff. And I think that having that buy-in from him and him spreading that message gives people the confidence to kind of dive in even though they might not understand it or think that it's something that they can use in their everyday life. But what I've learned is trust. You need to get that trust with another person to then go from there. Once that person trusts what you're saying, then it's an open field. But it took Bill coming in, talking to press team, meeting you guys, and sitting through one of your presentations to know instantly this is something that we need at Health Partners. And him just talking about it at all the meetings, like I was saying earlier, it's just a vital piece. It keeps things top of mind. One thing we've learned is, you can say something to someone, but it takes repeating that at least 10 to 15 times before it starts resonating with people. And while you could just be doing this work naturally, you're not realizing the impact and the difference that you're making in people's lives. And in the culture of an organization, you need that buy-in from top down. And with customer experience, it even has to be bottom up. It has to meet each other, kind of like in the middle. So that was another hurdle as well, but I kind of see it forming in front of my eyes, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you said there. All right. Well, Jessica, those are some great examples that you shared with us. Now I'm going to dive down a little bit deeper into the processes, methodologies, tools that you kind of use. As you think about the transformation to a more consumer-focused organization, do you have a favorite process or methodology or tool that you like to use to help people or the organization better understand what it is that you do and kind of get behind you?
When we first did our first sprint, I was so surprised and excited to show the organization and press team members the solutions that we came out with because of all the work. I lived it from beginning to end. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, we can really save the company a lot of money. And then going through all the barriers and red tape internally of being able to institute those solutions really hit my self-esteem and just my motivation at times because I felt like we weren't moving as quick as we should to be able to test this with the customers. But fast forwarding to today and having gone through our third sprint, you learn, you live and you learn, and you do have to take baby steps to implementing, and eventually you'll get to the bigger goal of being to save lot of money for the organization. So I think getting back to speaking to your customer is the most important, and getting them involved, letting them know. So I think brainstorming is very top of mind for me, because that's where I learn how I can help, or what else needs to be done and researched, and who I need to reach out to, because you are very well aware, when you embark on a journey of trying to solve a solution, you can very quickly find yourself trying to save the world, which we all know is not possible.
Absolutely.
You have to rein yourself back, and you have to stay focused. So I think brainstorming and there's many methods of brainstorming. I even learned recently that you can e-storm, but doing your research, surveying individuals, and then getting to creating pieces that you can bring back to the organization, such as personas, which you know what they are, semi-fictitious profiles that can represent a person or a group of people, are very dear to me. I love journey maps because you can identify and see the journey of that customer and all the touch points and the pain and the gain points, and it shows you where there's opportunity to innovate and find solutions and identify problems. So I love it all, but I think granular, love talking to people, and then the whole brainstorming piece of it, and then getting to that solution mode of ideation and prototyping, because it's like, okay, we got to learn what's the issue here, talk to people to see if we're seeing eye to eye and where we can learn a little bit more, and then let's get to how we can knock it out of the park and help these people in improving and bettering their experience and their lives. And you learn as yourself along the way. So not only are you helping other people, but you're also helping yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really important piece, is that you also, as the leader of this effort, you have to keep an open mind and know that you're going to learn along the way.
That's right.
Could you talk a little bit more, because I think you talked about the sprints a little bit. I'd love for you to talk about the sprints and how they have really brought the consumer in and the results of those. Could you share a little more in depth about that?
Sure. So in starting and launching the sprint and identifying our overarching problem that we want to solve, you get the opportunity to bring in that end user and all other components, factors, and individuals, stakeholders that play a part to solving that problem, bringing them in to just make sure we're hitting the mark. Our progress is effective and on point, but there is a real emotional aspect to that, because you're doing a good deed and you know it, but when it's in your face and you're connecting with another individual who's affected by this problem that you're trying to tackle, it really has an emotional impact on you.
Well, how does that then? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, how does that then translate to? Because at the end of your 12-week sprint, your model is then to present to your C-suite, your president, your executives. How do you take all of that forward, all of that learning from developing your how might we statements, identifying, going through discovery, problem statements, you create personas and journey maps, and especially bringing in the consumer. How then do you translate that as you really kind of pitch the solutions to specific problems with your C-suite? How does that impact that?
First, I'm like jumping out of my skin by the time we get to that point, because I'm like a kid in a candy store. Like, you won't believe what we just learned, what we just experienced over the next 12 weeks. And how do we translate this information to you? How do we even show you or even simulate the type of experience that we just had? I mean, you want to be mindful of people's time, but at the same time, you want everybody to go through this process with you. So I remember sitting with you when we were getting prepared for the first press-team presentation. And I just couldn't fathom and wrap my head around going through a slide deck of 60 slides.
Yeah.
Yeah, of the personas, of the problems, of even beginning to even talk about what we embarked on for the 12 weeks. And I remember telling you that I wanted to give a visual simulation of what we experienced. And while that would have been too expensive to even try and put that together all over again, you right away got to your sketch pad and started drawing what I was thinking in my head. And we came up with the time that we had, doing the press team presentation in a large conference room, getting banners of the personas, getting large canvases and poster boards that were like 6 feet tall and 13 feet wide of the journey map, and then walking them through each piece so that they understood the different tools that were used. And it was almost kind of giving them the whole process in an hour and a half, and then getting to the ideas and the solutions that we came up with. So kind of saying, this is the why, and then getting to the presentation of this is what we want to do and what we plan on doing.
Yeah, that was probably one of my favorite collaborations, mostly because you were open to ideas. And like you said, it is so hard to take people through and get them to empathize with what you've done over 12 weeks to get to know the consumer better and to develop the right solutions to the right problems that will not only impact the member, but the business. Because if the business invests $20 million and you don't see a result, the business goes out of business. There is no more business, right? And I remember having that conversation, and as we designed it, my main takeaway from that conversation with you is, or question really, is how do we help build empathy for them? And I loved it because I got to see you and the team walk them through each of the major outputs through each of the phases throughout the 12 weeks. And I think that helped them build empathy not only for the member and not only prime them to better understand what problems you were trying to solve as well as the solutions, but it gave them empathy around the level of effort and the absolute amazing amount of work that the team did, this cross-functional team of people that probably hadn't heard of consumer experience or personas or journey maps.
Right.
So if you translate that today, what are the main projects that you're working on today that you're really excited about to better get to know and impact your consumer?
Well, to the last sprint that we just wrapped up, the special needs sprint that you were a part of for the majority of the time, we just presented to press team 2 weeks ago, and literally the next day we get a request to present it to all of the leaders in healthcare management. So press team is about, I would say, 8 individuals, and we wrapped up the presentation for healthcare management this morning to 70 employees, and it was from supervisor level all the way up to VP level. And this is the area that's most heavily impacted by this project. So
that's exciting. I didn't know that. So you took.
I saved that one for you for this conversation.
Yeah, I'm not the one that's supposed to be surprised, but no, that's exciting. So you presented to press team, that small group, and the next day you got a call back and said, we want you to present to this larger group of 70. And why? What was your reason for that again?
So honestly, I didn't even ask, because to me that's not a bad problem to have in this world.
Sure.
But what I will say is, these are the individuals that are going to make these solutions happen. That's how I took it. These are the individuals that we need to get their buy-in, because they're the ones who are going to trickle down the orders to everyone else in their units to make sure that this happens. And what we did differently this time around that we didn't do the first 2 times, which is totally fine. You live, you learn, and you tweak and you do things differently. In the past, we presented our solutions individually, and this time around, we decided to do it as a bundled package. And we called it the HPP Cares Initiative.
Well, those examples were great. Let me ask you this, and who do you admire? Because I've introduced you to a number of people in the CX world, and we talked about different resources. But is there anyone in the consumer experience world that you feel is having a very positive impact in the field?
I have to say that recently I came across an individual. Her name is Jane Bliss. Have you heard of her?
I think I have. Jane Bliss?
Yes. She's the president of Customer Bliss.
Okay. Tell me more.
But she's also author of a book that I just ordered called Would You Do That to Your Mother?
Oh my gosh. What's
Just think about that. Just think
right.
about that. The minute I just saw that, and I'm constantly doing, I'm always doing research and trying to stay on top of the industry, and I came across that, and that's what gravitated me towards learning more about her. And what I did learn is that she believes in 5 leadership competencies, and that's honoring and managing customers as assets, which, wow, how powerful. Aligning around experience, which we know that, of course. Building a customer listening path, again, we witnessed it, we live it. Proactive experience, reliability, and innovation. And leadership, accountability, and culture, which we've already talked about all of those things. But those are her leadership competencies. And then she also has a recipe box. It's called Customer-Centric Recipes. And so I can't wait to get my hands on that. But she's the most recent person.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I just feel like I have failed you. Now you're educating me. This is awesome. I'm gonna have to pick up this book. It's the Chief Customer Officer 2.0, How to Build Your Customer-Driven Growth Organization. I think that's what that is. So
yeah, I think that was her first.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's phenomenal. I love those principles and so forth. I think they're absolutely. I mean, how did it make you feel reading that? I mean,
when I read the line, "Would you do that to your mother?" I wanted to run out my office and just start asking every employee on the floor, "Would you do that to your mother? Would you do that to your mother?"
I think it's a great question. I think it's a phenomenal question.
It really is.
And I mean, ultimately, it's kind of like the ethics question, right? Would you want your mom to see, or someone that you love to see what you've done in a negative way in the headlines, right? I mean, that question is very powerful because none of us want to get in trouble with our mom, or we want to treat our moms and fathers with respect, right? So,
and it's funny because the devil's advocate in me, of course, comes out instantly, and I'm like, well, what about those people who don't have good relationships with their mom? But you know what? At the end of the day, it's about the principle of respect, because yes, there are people who have great relationships with their mother or father, and there are some people who don't. But at the end of the day, we all say to ourselves, if our mother needed us, if our father needed us, if something went wrong, we will always, this person gave birth or raised me, because a mother is different to everybody, just like a father. But if you just think about the concept behind it, and I remember it took me, maybe it resonated with me because it took me back to all the work that we do in CX. I always think about that person in my life. So whether it's dealing with an elder, I think about my grandmother. If it's dealing with, someone who's the same age as my parents, I think of my parents. And if it's children, I think of my kids. And, oh, my God, so many stories and things that I've experienced makes me go home and squeeze them even tighter. And it improves my relationship with my children. So it's just something that I gravitated to instantly. So I'm all over that right now. But, of course, not to sound cheesy, you too. I think we are very similar. We have very similar personalities. And my experience, I believe people are, placed in your life for a reason. And embarking on this journey and meeting you, it's just been ever-changing, monumental.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, you came in, and the next question, I'm going to ask you to give advice to others in your situation. I remember when you came in and the organization was learning about consumer experience. Everybody's like, what is this, right? They were like, we already do this. And then a little bit over a year and 3 months later, after you've been in the role, I mean, it's like, yeah, I'd go work for Jessica. Absolutely. I mean, you have grown so much and so quickly. For me, it's been amazing because not only have you grown, but you're getting results, right? And again, I think that has a lot to do with your background. Your focus has always been on others, and I think you're seeing the results, which I think is phenomenal. And so, I kind of alluded to that question. What advice would you give to someone like you who 15 months ago got this job as the Director of Consumer Experience? Is that what your title is? I can't remember the exact title.
Yes.
Yeah, so you become a director of consumer experience, and you had to establish an entire department and build this, which you've done. What advice would you give to someone who just picked up that role and is wondering what to do next?
Do it, embrace it, and just know and be flexible but driven. Know you're going to have your awesome high days, and then you're going to have your days where you feel knocked down. But use that as your motivation to continue moving forward, because even when you have those days that you feel knocked down, there's still work being done behind the scenes that, because you're so driven, you might not see it on the forefront, but it always circles back, because what you put out is what you will get in return every single time.
Yeah, that's pretty humbling. I think you're spot on there. Anything else you'd like to say about the work that you've done, the whole world of consumer experience? Anything else you'd like to add at all?
I'm looking forward to what tomorrow brings. I love the field. I love the idea. I think we're getting back. As a nation, I just wish that everyone would adapt to this mind frame, and I just think with time, there'll be some type of an impact. But getting back to just the organizational level of it, I see if we continue at the momentum that we're going, there's going to be big things and big changes, and it's possible. So I hope to still be here to see all the changes that are done.
Yeah, wow, what a great opportunity to connect back up with Jessica, one of my favorite human beings on the planet. She has just immersed herself into consumer experience. She consistently learns, tries out new ideas, just really exemplifies the kind of people that I love working with in this industry. And if you met Jessica, you'd love working with her too. And shout out to her organization. The topmost leadership saw a need. Even though I thought they were doing a fantastic job, they wanted to do even more to get to know their consumer. And as we all know, without that kind of support at that top level, it's hard to bring it up from the grassroots to really build the practice. So Jessica's done a fantastic job over these last 18 months, and I'm really excited to hear and see where she and the organization are 6 months and a year from now. They're just getting started, but they've reached that tipping point to where, what's this new thing? We don't know what it is. We're afraid of it. To, hey, almost everybody in that organization, over 800 people, have been trained on kind of some of the concepts, the mindset, and the basic tools. So there's only good things for Jessica and her organization. So yeah, enjoy this. Listen to it again 3 or 4 times. We're still working on our rhythm, and appreciate your all's patience. And until next time, take care. Keep designing. Bye.